It's estimated that the average cost of living with MS is over $88,000 per year, which can make it especially challenging to save and invest for the future. Welcome to Ask an MS Expert. I'm John Strum, your moderator and host of the Real Talk MS podcast. Each week, Real Talk MS reaches thousands of people in more than 100 countries around the world with the news that people affected by MS need to know. My wife, Jean, lived with progressive MS for 23 years, so I've had a front row seat experiencing all the ways that MS can impact a family. Today, I'll be asking our expert the questions you want answered. Please feel free to post your comments and questions on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. MS Navigators will be online throughout today's live program, answering your questions and connecting you to resources. Joining us today is Paula Cole. Paula is Vice President and Head of Pension Risk Transfer at Nationwide. She's a certified personal trainer, a former collegiate athlete, and a certified professional soccer coach. Paula also serves as president of Nationwide's African American Women Associate Resource Group, and she's a member of Nationwide's CEO Advisory Council. Paula has been involved with the National MS Society in a variety of leadership roles since being diagnosed with MS in 2000. Welcome, Paula. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, John. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, before we get into what it means to develop that financial mindset, can you briefly share a bit about yourself, your diagnosis, your MS journey?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, as you indicated, my journey with MS started in 2000, and I was an undergrad at The Ohio State University playing soccer and woke up one morning paralyzed. I wasn't able to move and quickly found out through diagnosis that I was living with MS. And at the time, being young and still trying to figure out my collegiate career, I quickly had to pivot to what's life going to look like beyond what I had seen of it for 19 years or 20 years at that point. And so my journey has been one in which I've had to navigate career, figure out financially how I was going to live with an incurable disease, also raise a family, and live the best lifestyle that I have now become accustomed to. The journey has been extremely challenging, but there has been a lot of reward from understanding who I am, understanding how I would navigate those areas, and ensuring I had a village that surrounded me as I did so.
And tell us a little bit about your role at Nationwide.
Sure. So my role at Nationwide is I'm a business leader for a business line called Pension Risk Transfer. We acquire public and private sector pension plans, and primarily we focus in on supporting institutional businesses navigate their financial uncertainty. It's one in which I have to work with people, I have to manage strategy, and then we have to deliver sales and distribution of some of those pension plans.
So, how has your experience with MS influenced the way you think about money, the way you think about work, and the way you perceive your future lifestyle?
I would say a lot of what I focus in on is control what I can control. That's been a lesson learned, right? You hear that quite often, control what you can control. And by doing so, it's understanding what's going to potentially be an outcome of a relapse, but then also knowing that I need to live in the moment. And how I do that is making sure that we have financial security for my family and my children. I have two daughters. And then also being able to forecast the unpredictableness of MS.
You know, it's common for people to feel overwhelmed when they're thinking about money. And I think that's true for people who are living with MS and people who don't have MS, actually. But where do you think is the best place to start, especially when someone is living with MS and they could be dealing with long-term disability and unexpected health issues?
I think the first place to start is to get a hold and understanding of your expenses, right? And then also understand your income. So there's two different ways for you to look at what's around you. Your expenses, so those are the things that you spend money on. And then how much do you have coming in? How much do you earn? Oftentimes we leave those two things out of sight, out of mind, and we just live in the day to day of expenses and accumulating those, going out to eat, shopping, and whatever else may be something that is in your expense column. And then we have our income coming in. But I believe that living with an incurable disease, you have to have a stronger grasp on both of those areas so that you can seize the opportunity of those unknown expenses as and when they come through, and you can balance them with the volatility of what your income might be, especially if you are an individual that has to go in and out of work because of the unpredictableness of this disease, the relapses. So making sure you have a strong understanding of both your expenses and then your income coming in.
Rebecca tells us that she was diagnosed with MS last year, and she's already begun to understand how challenging and costly living with MS can be. I'm curious, did you encounter any financial surprises you wish someone had warned you about when you were first diagnosed?
I really appreciate this question because it made me reflect on my initial diagnosis, and my parents were my caregivers, right? So I was a college athlete. I was a state or two away from my parents. I had to come back to living with them. And unbeknownst to me, until now I've reflected on it, is the caregiver burden. And so I think that's a big surprise that I had of how much those that surround me and support me also need to understand and be financially aware of how to care for me. So that's one surprise I'll call out. And no matter where you're at in the life cycle of this disease, there is going to be some resemblance of a caregiver burden. And so understanding how you can equip yourself and equip those that care for you, whether or not it's friends, families, or someone that has to come in your home and help support, realizing what MS means to them was a surprise for me. And it continues to be an aspect that I try to anchor to and have the reality sitting in the forefront of my head.
Well, having spent many years as an MS caregiver, I can co-sign everything you just said.
Yes.
And I also heard you point out a minute ago how living with MS means living with uncertainty. What's the best way for someone with MS to manage what could be fluctuating income or those unexpected medical costs?
I believe that, again, going back to the mention of income versus expense and making sure that you're keeping log and track of those expenses that are in particular tied to the disease, and then also the unknown of when those expenses can start to accumulate. And that might be through relapse.
Well,
I Yeah, I try to do in good practice, making sure that I'm writing those things down. We're keeping log of them as a family. And hopefully there's infrequent times in which that you have to look at those expenses and they grow. But if you don't have a log or understanding of what those expenses are, then they can go out of sight, out of mind, and you're not able to tie them back to the income that you have coming in.
We heard from Steve, who says he's lived with MS for about 10 years and he has some money saved. He'd like to create a health emergency fund. How can Steve go about setting up that type of account?
Yeah. So one of the first things that I would say, back to the control which you can control, also sits in the column of find your extended village. And this example is one in which seek out financial advisors or those individuals that are equipped with being able to help factor in what a health emergency might look like, because it can go beyond keeping a bucket of money in a bank account or a savings account. And financial advisors and planners would be able to help you extend that. I would say the other things to keep in the forefront of your mind is there's enough applications or apps out there that will allow you to factor in and categorize items that will be necessary for you in that health emergency fund. So the organization comes by virtue of an application. The things that should be considered can come as output of working with a financial planner or a financial advisor that could also tune you into opportunities and areas that you might even have at your own employer that could help you with managing the additional income or need for money expense, right, to be there.
Olivia tells us she had always planned to work into her 60s, but after being diagnosed with MS a few years ago, she feels that her career goals and retirement plans, well, they need to be revised. Do you have any suggestions for Olivia about how to reevaluate her long-term financial plans?
Yes, one of the things that we should all keep in the forefront of our mind is retirement income. And retirement income is a major part of Social Security. When you think about our Social Security benefits, for some that might be far off, but as example, Olivia's is in short time. 66 is our normal retirement time. Social Security is going to take the highest 35 years. So things to consider is, how do you make sure that you're still working to help derive what's going to come out of Social Security? Full part-time is an important aspect. I would also suggest that the evaluation of additional retirement income or additional buckets of opportunity that might be available at your employer will help you determine additional ways to save for that point in time in which that employer is no longer there or you're officially retired. So there's other means by which that you can create retirement savings, and that could be through traditional 401ks or even an HSA, a healthcare spending account. But thinking about retirement income, how to generate more, and then acknowledging if your employer has the opportunity for you to leverage some of those additional ways to save money.
You know, it's not unusual for people to work side jobs that fit their interests or lifestyle. How should someone living with MS go about determining whether a side hustle could be a good way for them to earn extra income?
So I love the side hustle question, mainly because I had my own side hustle unbeknownst to me, and that was my career in soccer. And I didn't think about it until soccer was taken away from me, quote unquote, when I was diagnosed. So I was on the field and then no longer could play. But then when I got to a point in which I could go back or start to work, I was looking at my career post undergrad, but then also looking at, well, what else can I think about that could bring me income? And coaching soccer was that thing for me. As you think about what you're doing in your day to day beyond your regular 9 to 5, think about those things that maybe people reach out to you for help. And can that be an additional source of income? Examples: cutting hair, sewing. And I use both of these because I just recently had this conversation with my oldest daughter who's in college and she's trying to figure out her side hustle. Those are things that people often come to her to do, even painting nails. So think about those things that people come to you to do. And is there a means in which that you can create a stream of income? If you are to go down that path, this is also where it is beneficial to make sure you have the right type of paperwork, tax implications, if you are to formulate that into a true stream of income for you.
Charlie tells us that it's getting hard for him to keep working as a healthcare technician, and he's thinking about applying for Social Security disability insurance benefits. What financial impacts should Charlie be aware of as he's deciding whether he should leave his job?
Yeah, thanks for this question, John. I somewhat alluded to this in some of my responses to other questions, but it's the things that your employer bring to you as a full-time or a part-time employee that needs to be in the forefront of your planning as you think about pivoting away from the workforce. That's loss of health insurance. We as MS warriors need to have some sort of source of health insurance, loss of retirement savings, or even contributing to those savings and having the employer contribute to them as well. A healthcare savings account, which allows you to diversify how you're saving for retirement and how those funds are actually used to help with health expenses. If you pivot away from the workforce, you're no longer able to contribute or have that contribution be matched by an employer. So those are things that are top of mind. Trying to maximize Social Security income by staying in the workforce is an important aspect to consider as you're starting to plan for the potential of that happening. So before it happens, can you capitalize on savings and other means and other ways so that if you do have to pivot away from the workforce, you've already taken into consideration the savings and income that is going to help you when you don't have that stream of money coming in because you've stepped away from work.
What are some ways that someone living with MS can get started planning for their financial future? Even someone who may have very limited experience with long term care needs or estate planning?
So this goes back to seeking out advice. And to the best extent that you can, finding individuals that are experienced in planning savings, and especially individuals that have also had clients that have lived with long-term disability challenges. So seeking out advice, and then also making sure that you're taking in consideration and creating a log of income plus expenses that are going to be potential things that you would need to take in consideration. I would also say this goes back to control what you can control. In that expense column, are there things that you can stop doing Are there things that you can start doing, setting aside additional money because you've stopped doing something? And then what else can you continue to do? Those are things within our control to be able to manage our money within the space that we understand it, using applications or even just a trusty planner. That will prepare you for a conversation with a financial planner or advisor that's going to ask some of those same questions of you, or where are your expenses, and then how much income do you have coming in?
Barbara tells us she's a widow and she lives with MS. She's on a fixed income and has one child who plans on attending college. Barbara hopes to help her son pay for college and I'm curious, I guess, are there financial resources available to support individuals who are facing the same situation Barbara is?
Yeah, so I appreciate this question because I currently have a daughter who's in college. And before she embarked on her journey, we had to go through a review of how are we going to support you while you're in college? And then also still taking in consideration needing to plan for retirement or needing to still save while we have the expense burden of my daughter going to college. And specifically, there are means at the universities that you can reach out to understand FAFSA, to understand what's ahead in the journey of a collegiate or a individual that's going to college. There's also means through scholarships, right? And making sure that your children are looking at all of the scholarship opportunities and applying for them early on. The thing I would say to Barbara is make sure you're not forgetting about your own retirement or about the time in which that you will need more financially than your child might need because you're living with MS. That was one of the reflection points for me, is that while my daughter is going to college, we also need to make sure that we have a comfortable savings for those times in which I might be out of the workforce or expenses might get high because of MS.
You've already started to answer this question, but I wanted to ask you what types of people, tools, or services are available to make it easier for someone with a long term disability to keep their finances organized.
Yes. And I have highlighted some of those things. It is in the generic sense, a Google search away to find financial systems or applications that might be best suited to help you organize your expenses. Even some of our local bank organizations have applications on their websites that will help you bucket out your money and help you manage the income that you have coming in against the expenses that you have going out. And especially if you've worked with them for a long time, they already have records of those. So use some of those applications, but then also seek out advice of those individuals that know more about financial planning than you do, right? Ask for help. Do not go it alone. It's the best, right? It's the best advice that I could give.
As someone who works in financial services and lives with MS, what are some things in your budget that you always make sure to include? What are those
Yes,
things that help you, not just survive, but thrive?
yes, yes. The cost of expense. So we factor in from a planning standpoint. We've forecasted. It's been 25 years I've lived with MS. So there's have been unfortunately enough experiences that I've had that we can forecast what happens when MS happens to me, right? Or a relapse happens to me. So that is something that we factor in. The other thing that my husband says to me all the time is that we need to also make sure that we're factoring in how to continue our happiness. So we plan and are strategic in our planning around time away. So experiences is the one that I anchor to the most. Can I make sure that my kids have experiences, my families have experiences? So we try to budget what experiences mean for us. So for management, I would say make sure you understand the cost of expense of this disease, but also make sure you know what keeps you in your happy zone and budget for that.
I've always found that the plans that succeed are the plans that include a clear goal. So, what might be a meaningful but realistic financial goal that someone living with MS can set for themselves for the next year?
Yeah, so I love the goal oriented aspect. The start, stop, continue can help you understand and create clear and delineation of your goals. What is something as you look at your expenses and look at those itemized list, what are things that you need and what are things that you want? And can you, for the year, draw a line item and delineate between the things that are necessary and the things that you want? That's one aspect that you can start with. And then the other thing is creating a goal that allows you to save a percentage more year over year than you did the last. And that might be very small percentage to start, but as you look at the expense column, that might mean that you have to remove something from that list. But as you remove something from the expense list, can you put it into the savings list? So a goal is remove something from the expense column and can I add it to the savings column?
Well, you've shared some great advice about how someone living with MS can approach financial planning and how important it is to do that. Let me ask you, what would you say is the top takeaway that you'd like our viewers to remember and to use?
Yes. Control what you can control and make sure that you have a clear understanding of your expenses and then the money that you have coming in and that you're saving appropriately for those times where things have gotten out of control because of MS, and ensuring that you also are not going it alone and you are seeking out help for your financial planning.
Well, thanks for being with us today, Paula.
Thanks, John. I appreciated the time to be here.
Today's program survey has now been posted in the chat for your feedback. Please take a minute and complete it to help us create programs and topics with you in mind. Please be sure to visit the National MS Society's website for information and resources on MS, connection opportunities, and ways for you to get involved. You can also connect with an MS Navigator to receive personalized support by phone, email, or through the Society's website by chat. A recording of today's program will be posted on the MS Society's website at nationalmssociety.org/MSexpert, as well as on Facebook and YouTube. Finally, I'll invite you to join me each week on the Real Talk MS podcast, where we continue the conversation that we start here. You can find Real Talk MS on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Thanks for joining us for Ask an MS Expert. We'll see you next week.